Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be working on a really easy watercolour painting of a wintry landscape, and I'm using lots of different cool tones with my watercolours, so make sure you grab everything you need so you can follow along and create this painting also. If you're new to my channel, my name is Gemma. I create weekly art content, so make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on any of my videos. In today's video I'm going to be using my tube watercolour paints that I bought from Tiger, so if you haven't seen that video where I reviewed them, I will link it below. I'm adding a really light wash to my watercolour paper, so I have gone for a very light yellow and also a light blue because I want to create a really light base for my landscape. And I'm going to then blot out and lift some of that blue just to lighten it further so that I can build and layer up my colours on top of this, because I want it to be a very subtle background to begin with. I've used kitchen towel to lift my watercolours because it's much better than a tissue paper, so I would definitely recommend using kitchen towel for lifting your watercolours. I then start building up further areas of my background and layering that on top, before then adding in a wet and wet section here because I want a slight abstract form in the very background of my piece. I'm also going to lift out some of the sky in just a moment with a very clean paintbrush because I want to show the sun and I want that to be a very bright section of the background. So I'm just using clean paintbrush and lifting out some of that watercolour. I'm stippling some areas at the top of my painting in preparation for where my tree line is going to go, before then working on some darker areas along the bottom part of my landscape. So I'm building up the foreground and adding in some darker shadows, and I'm using some cooler tones for this because I want it to look very wintry with those blue shadows. So I'm adding those in along where my tree line is going to go to add in that cast shadow from the sunlight. And I'm building on top of my colours and I'm layering from a blue to a purple at the moment because I want there to be quite a lot of depth in colour between my blues and my purples and my cool tones to show where they are laying on top of the snowy scene. Once I've added in my cast shadows, I can then build up a little bit more on that foreground to add a bit of texture within the ground. So I build up on top of my original layer to give a more of a bumpy finish to that snow, because although snow often looks very flat when it first lays, there are often bumps where there are uneven surfaces within the ground, so I want to try and get that within my painting just by layering up my different tones of yellows and blues onto my painting. I'm now going to be adding in my trees, and I'm going to be using a variety of browns that I have mixed. And the darker the brown, the closer it will look to the viewer in the piece. So I have got some darker browns that I'm going to be using in the foreground, and then further away I'm going to be watering down some of my paint just to create a lighter tone of my paint, and these will be the trees that are further away in the distance. And this is a really good way for you to get more depth to your piece to make it look like you could walk through that woodland. And once I've added in all of the main trees, I can then start working on the branches in between to make it look a lot fuller and also a lot more realistic. And I'm just going to use a really fine paintbrush for this to show those branches. And you can also use your variety of different shades of brown to show which ones are further away and which ones are closer to the foreground. I've also added white watercolour to a couple of the trees to show that it is really frosty within the woodland, before then stippling with my white watercolour paint over the top of the trees to show that there has been a snowfall within the woodland. And I'm using quite a thick watercolour for this because I want it to really show within the piece. And I'm just creating a nice random pattern with my stippling to show the organic nature of the tree line, before then adding in stippling with a darker shade because I want to build up a shadow within this side of the woodland, because obviously the sunlight is casting behind the trees. This side of our tree line will be fairly shaded, and the cool tones of that snow would actually look quite blue. So I'm going to be adding in my purples and my blues in this side to really show that it is sunset and also in the shade. I then start to lift out some of the sections of the sun just to make sure that it looks like there are some rays casting out from there, before then refining my shadows. So I'm going to build up further shadows within this piece to make it look a lot more wintry and also a lot more shaded. I'm adding in more blue over the top of my purple and layering that on top. However, you can still see some of that purple showing through. I haven't layered up completely over the top of that. And I'm varying the tones with the blue just to make sure that it looks quite subtle in certain places, before then adding further areas of blue within the ground to make it look like there are some areas that are slightly uneven with that snow. Once I've done this, I then start adding a wash of navy blue over the top of the tree line to further define some of the shaded areas. And because I had already layered up with my white stippling along with the purple and the blue stippling, this layer doesn't completely cover that. Those stippling effects are actually still showing through, so I can still see where the effect of the snowfall is within this tree line. And to make sure that this wash of colour is actually quite subtle, I also lift out any excess paint so that I haven't got a really dark layer on top of my watercolours that I've already placed down. And now I can just refine any areas, darken any of the trees that I would like to darken to make them stand out a little bit further, before refining some of my paints to make them look a little bit more subtle. For example, the snow on the trees, before then pulling off the masking tape. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love doing this. I did have a little bit of a bleed through on one section, but I think that overall it looks okay. So there you have it, that was my watercolour painting, and I'm not a watercolourist, but it's something that I would like to get better at, so maybe that can be one of my goals for 2021. If you have enjoyed my video today, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on any of my videos. I've got loads of videos planned for the new year, so make sure you subscribe and we can make next year a really good one over on my channel. Let me know in the comments what type of wintry scene you plan on painting. And I will see you next week. I hope you all have an amazing Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. If not, just I hope you all stay safe and well. And I will see you next week. Bye guys.